On this week's FAS TV, we are visiting Crichton Royal Farm at Dumfries, one of Scotland's rural college research farms and home to the famous Langhill dairy herd. Rearing heifers as replacements for the herd is an important part of the cycle of milk production. There have been significant changes made at Crichton over the last year in how the heifer calves are managed. The aim of these changes has been to improve health and growth performance to reduce the age at first calving, as well as utilising pasture to reduce heifer rearing costs.
My name is Sven Kobs. I'm the Southwest Farms Operational Manager for SIUC Farms. I'm German. I've immigrated to New Zealand almost 30 years ago, and I've studied agriculture there, and I've had a career there in pasture-based block calving systems for almost 10 years. But had a very strong interest in TMR systems. My ambition was, when this role came up, to see whether there's a chance to integrate pasture grazing into a traditionally TMR-based system. And the opportunity here at SIUC is one, of course, that is always looking for innovation and trying to progress the industry. So, fantastic opportunity, that's why I'm here. I mean, I've been here for 18 months now. And when I first arrived, I certainly noticed that the heifer rearing system here is markedly different, both from the New Zealand block calving type system, as well as from the TMR system that I saw in Germany. And it wasn't just that. I started to look at target weights, for example. I looked at milk input, weaning weights, and I found that there were quite stark differences. My philosophy is that you want to maximize the potential of a growing replacement heifer early in life. The first 12 weeks are absolutely critical to setting a heifer up for a productive, long life with many calvings, let's say. When I then looked at some of the data coming not just out of SIUC but also out of Scotland generally, I found that the longevity was maybe not quite there, and I sort of brought it back to maybe the heifer rearing scheme itself. So I made changes based on what I thought were the objectives or the targets that I needed to meet. So for our heifers, we are aiming to have a weaning weight of about 120 kgs, at which point they should be 12 weeks old. Target weight for breeding, and when you're aiming for an average first calving age of 23 to 24 months, needs to be 13 to 15 months. So the target weight that we're aiming for at 13 months is 385 kgs. And here in the southwest of Scotland, you have a fantastic pasture-based resource for at least 6 months of the year, possibly up to 10 months of the year, where the heifers can graze outside. And the raising cost or the rearing costs for a heifer on pasture is maybe a sixth or seventh of a heifer that's raised inside on TMR. So for me, the second phase from weaning up until first calving is one of minimizing the costs of rearing. So under the old heifer rearing regime, when heifers were housed indoors, my calculations were that based on a TMR ration right through to 24 months of age, the presumed first calving age, you might spend between 1,500 to 1,900 pounds on that heifer. In a rearing system that includes pasture feeding and a combination of TMR, because at some stage the animals have to be indoors. The period November to January, February are certainly critical times of the year where you probably have to have animals indoors. I think you can reduce the cost down to 900 to 1,000 pounds per animal by the time that animal calves for the first time.
There are many challenges when it comes to rearing heifers to calve down at 2 years of age.
So here, of course, in a TMR system, we're dealing with animals that are 700 kg mature live weights, so the target growth rates on a daily basis are 800 to 850 grams a day. So the challenge is to have pasture of sufficient quality over the relevant period of time that they're grazing that can deliver these sort of growth rates. And interestingly, some animals do really well. They achieve growth rates of 1.1 to 1.2 kgs a day consistently. But you also have a proportion of animals that are not doing well on pasture. The biggest challenge, I think, is to manage on a day-to-day basis to have appropriate quality pasture ahead of the animals. When soil conditions are right and when the pasture is out there, the animals do perform. They really do perform well. When conditions become a bit more adverse, when soil condition or pasture management becomes a challenge in terms of making sure that you don't pack or treat the soil, that is something that is much more challenging here than I've ever experienced it before. What we've done is to meet target weights at first breeding or first AI much more consistently, enabling us to bring the first calving age down by several months, I would say. Yeah. So the overall objective, I believe, is to rear heifers that are able to produce at high production levels for 4, 5, up to 6 lactations. In order to achieve that, we need to rear heifers that have a first calving age of between 22 to 24 months. I would like to think that because of the local conditions, we can do that more efficiently, utilizing pasture, not 100%, but for at least some time of the rearing cycle, so as to lower overall costs for raising a heifer and making the system more efficient, more sustainable, more resilient.
When it comes to managing any livestock, veterinary input is critical to ensure the health of the animals.
So my name's Colin Mason. I'm one of the vets that works with SRUC, and today we're here to talk about our young stock rearing systems. The main reason for talking about this is the big focus is on trying to get our heifers to calve into the herd at 2 years old, or possibly even slightly less than 2 years old. That's really, really important from a health point of view, and it's really important from an environmental point of view and a business point of view. These heifers don't earn any money for the farm until they start milking, and they're a cost to the farm until that point. So it's really important from a financial point of view to get these heifers earning some money back. It's also really important from an environmental point of view as well, because they're a carbon cost to the farm until they start to pay us back in terms of food production. One of the things that's come out from a lot of the research that's been done in recent years is the start these girls get in the first 8 weeks of their life really sets the course for how they go for the rest of their lives. And the first 8 weeks are so critical in relation to how they're going to grow as youngsters, how they're going to perform in their first lactation when they first start milking, and ultimately how they're going to perform in the whole of their milking lives. The main health challenges that we face in young dairy calves before they're weaned are scour and pneumonia. The bugs that cause those diseases are omnipresent. They're omnipresent on our farm, and they're omnipresent on every dairy farm. So everything that we do in trying to manage these diseases is trying to look at how we reduce the risk and we maximise the resilience and the immunity of the calves to be able to cope with these things. So what we've tried to do is to improve the disease resistance of these calves and improve the resilience of these calves by various different ways. So we've made some changes to milk feeding in terms of how much we feed these calves. We've increased the amount of milk feeding that we give them. We've also tried to improve the environment and the hygiene of these calves. We've tried to keep them warmer in the winter so that they're not, facing some of the cold stresses that we get in wintertime. One of the first things that we've done is looked at the thermal comfort of these calves. What we call the lower critical temperature for these newborn calves is around about 15 degrees. And what we mean by lower critical temperature is if the temperature drops below that, then they need to use up energy to keep warm. Calves in this area spend a lot of their time below the lower critical temperature, in that at some point during the day, sometimes in the middle of the night, it will go below 15 degrees, and therefore these calves will face a challenge. What we've done, first of all, we've basically created a little microclimate for the calves, in that in the first 2 weeks of life, they're in a hutch in a building. So it's almost like 2 layers of clothes, isn't it? In that they're in a microclimate which should keep them warmer at that stage. We're now big users of calf jackets as well to keep them warm in the first few weeks of life. And what we've also done is make sure that we try and keep those calf jackets on for longer once they get into these group pens that you see here. So when we move them up into these group pens, that's a bit of a change for them. It's a little bit of a stress for them, and we want to make sure that they stay warm at that point as well. So we keep them warm, and we keep the calf jackets on really for the first month of life. Things that we might think about in the future is actually adding in more heat as well. Certainly in the individual pens is when we could actually add in heat through heat lamps. The other thing that we've done as well in terms of combating cold stress is to increase their feeding rates and just put more food into them, put more calf milk replacer into them. And by doing that, we're obviously giving them more energy so that they have to actually utilise some of that energy to keep warm. The wood chip bedding's an interesting one here, and that it's something that's quite new, and we've not really tried this before. I think one of the benefits of it is it's very freely draining. So that's one of the big benefits, is there any moisture that's coming through from the calves, whether that's urine or in the feces, is able to drain away very, very quickly. So it's a drier environment. It's also better from an air quality point of view in that there's less dust involved in it. So we don't get any issues with dusty straw. Perhaps one of the downsides has been that it's not allowed for the same amount of thermal comfort, but at the same time, you know, by doing the other things in terms of trying to keep them warm, we've hopefully balanced that out. One of the other challenges with the wood chip, which is keeping it clean, and what we're doing is we're cleaning out the pens, but we're not necessarily changing the bedding between those calves, which does pose risk. But what it has also done is it's increased the focus of the farm staff in terms of trying to keep the bedding clean, keep the wood chips clean by poo picking these calves, if you like, and removing any fecal material that's there. And between calves, it's also disinfected between calves, but it's not changed between calves. And I'll be honest, as a vet, that worried me. In that I was concerned about hygiene, and I was particularly concerned about cryptosporidia risk, and that might increase, and we were kind of prepared for that as a problem. But it's not something that we've seen. The way I tend to look at a calf rearing enterprise from a disease rate point of view is firstly look at mortality rates, which is probably the tip of the iceberg. We really want that to be below 3%. And we're certainly below that on this farm now. So our mortality rate is within target. We also want to look at disease treatment rates and see where they are. So here our scour treatment rates dropped from about 15% of calves down to about 5% of calves. So we're pretty pleased that has been an improvement. Also worth noting as well that we've actually increased the amount of milk that we've fed, but the scour rates have dropped. And one of the concerns of a lot of farmers is that if you feed more milk to them, they actually scour, and that's not been the case here, so far at least. Our pneumonia treatment rates have come down a little bit. They've dropped from in around the 30% mark, in the 30s, down to into the 20s. And we'd still like to see some further improvements in that, and that's something that I think we still need to work on. The other thing that I think has been a real success is that our growth rates have improved, and we're now sitting at a growth rate here of about 0.9 of a kilogram a day on average, and that is a real good take-home message. In as much as that's a combination of what the calf is thinking about its environment, how healthy it is, and how well managed it is. And if the growth rates are sitting somewhere between 0.8 and a kilo a day, then we're doing okay. So we're quite pleased with that.
Depending on the time of year, heifers are now put out to grass as soon as possible after weaning.
And one of the things that they've got to do, and one of the things that they've got to learn to do when they go outside, is to learn to graze. And it's interesting, a lot of people think that modern Holstein Friesians don't know how to graze. Well, they do, and they can, but it probably takes these calves, when they go out at, let's say, 3 to 4 months old, it probably takes them about a month to fully learn how to graze. It's a learned behaviour. And what we've tried to do with that is just to transition the diet as well as we can. So they get some total mixed ration, which will include some grass silage before they go out at quite a young age, to try and get them onto a grass-based forage before they go out. And then what we also do is once they're out, they stay on that total mixed ration for for the first few weeks after they're out. And what we can then do is tailor and limit that ration, reduce it down, reduce the availability of that TMR to them as the amount of grass that they're eating increases. The other health challenges that we face are really parasite related, so coccidiosis, roundworms, so stomach and intestinal worms, and lungworm. What we're doing with coccidiosis, first of all, is really monitoring and managing the risk. We will use strategic oral doses with anticoccidials as required, and we're really using that on the basis of if we're starting to see some evidence of scour, or we're seeing that growth rates are stabilised and not increasing, then we may move to a cocci treatment. So we're really doing that on a monitoring basis as they go out. Same for the worms, same for the gut worms. We'll monitor those and we'll treat as necessary. And what we're also doing now is we're using vaccine for lungworm. So everything is getting vaccinated, starting before they go outside and before they meet parasites. And we find that's now a very effective way of managing that disease and reducing our use of anthelmintics for these animals, particularly in the autumn time.
Nutrition plays a key role in getting heifer calves off to a good start in life.
I'm Lorna McPherson and I'm a dairy consultant and nutritionist with SAC Consulting. We know that a calf's future performance is closely linked to how much milk we feed them in the first few weeks of life, and essentially the more milk we feed, the higher the growth rate. So that's one of the big changes that we've made here, in that we've greatly increased how much milk we're feeding to the calves. Getting calves off to a good start begins with good colostrum feeding, and the colostrum management on the farm is really good here. All colostrum here is tested with a Brix refractometer, and we're aiming to hit the target of over 22% on the Brix scale. That equates to 50 grams of antibodies per litre. If the colostrum meets that quality, it's then pasteurised and then frozen in 4-litre bags. That frozen colostrum can easily be thawed very quickly in a water bath once a cow calves. All our colostrum is fed via a stomach tube, and we're aiming to feed 10% of body weight. So most calves will get around about 4 litres of colostrum in that first feed. One of the other changes that we've made to the way we feed our calves is that for the first 2 weeks, when they're kept in individual hutches, is that we feed them transition milk. So transition milk is milk from the 2nd to the 6th milkings. So it's not colostrum, but it's not whole milk either. Essentially that transition milk, it's a waste product because it can't go in the tank for human consumption, but it has a lot of health benefits for the calves. It has a higher level of fat and protein than whole milk or most calf replacers, so it's higher in energy. It still contains a good level of antibodies, which will help provide some localised protection against some of the common causes of scour in the gut. And it also contains growth factors, which is really important to help gut development and help develop a healthy gut microbiome. Once the calves have been fed transition milk for 2 weeks in the individual hutches, they move over into our main calf rearing shed, where they're housed in groups of around about 12 to 14 calves in group igloos. Here they're fed on automatic feeders. Previously, we only used to feed them 7 litres of milk, but we've now increased that up to 10 litres. The concentration of powder that we feed is at 13.5%, so now the maximum amount that we're feeding per calf is 1.35 kilos of calf milk replacer a day. I think over the years, the recommendations for how much milk we feed calves has greatly increased, but now I'm commonly seeing a lot of farmers feeding between 8 to 10 litres. So feeding well over 1 kilo, even up to 1.5 kilos of milk replacer a day. And that has significant benefits in terms of increased growth rate, but also improved health of the calves as well. What we find here with some of the changes that we've made with using transition milk and feeding higher levels of milk, we're finding that we've increased growth rates in the calves from about 0.7 kilos a day up to 0.9 kilos a day. We're also weaning our calves later. We've moved from an 8-week weaning system to a 12-week weaning system. Generally, the older that calves are weaned, they tend to be less susceptible to disease. Their immune system is stronger and they tend to cope with the stresses of weaning much better. One of the other changes that we made was to change the calf milk replacer that we were feeding. We've moved from a whey-based powder to a skim-based powder. Now, a lot of research will show that calves can perform just as well on whey-based powders, but I think skim is still seen to be superior. And we've also gone for a higher fat milk replacer, so it's higher in energy as well. While it is more expensive, the calves are performing very well on it. We've now changed from feeding straw to the calves to using hay instead. The reason we changed to feeding hay is that once the calves are weaned, depending on the time of year and weather conditions, they'll either go to grass or they'll be housed and fed a grass silage-based TMR. So we felt that offering hay early on in life was a bit of a closer or smoother transition to get them onto either a silage-based or a grass-based diet compared to using straw. they seem to have managed this change very well. When we wean the calves, they get a gradual step down in milk over a 24-day period. That's really important to give them plenty of time to increase their starter feed intake, and we'd be aiming for them to eat about 3 kilos of starter feed when they're weaned at 12 weeks of age. The intake of starter feed is really important for good rumen development and to make sure we minimise any post-weaning growth check. We certainly invested a lot more into the calves early on in life, and the cost of feeding extra milk replacer has worked out at just over £100 per calf. While that sounds like a lot, if we think about how much it costs to rear a heifer from birth to the point of calving, it could be on average close to £2,000. So making that extra investment at that young age is really worthwhile in terms of the benefits that we're getting back in terms of improved calf growth rates and better health. And hopefully that will translate to better performance post-weaning and reducing our age at first calving.
The farm manager is always keen to encourage young people into the dairy industry.
So I'm Megan Brown, I'm the senior stocks person here at the Crichton Farm. I've been here for about 2 years now and previously milked when I started and then was on young stock for about 1.5 years. So previously we were working with an 8-week weaning programme, but now we have moved to a 12-week weaning programme. So on our 12-week weaning programme, the calves start off the weaning process at 60 days. This is over a 24-day period, so they're fully weaned at 84 days, being the full 12 weeks. This gradual reduction is 0.4 litres of milk a day. By doing it this way, we're actually reducing the stress to the calves. Overall, they have better growth rates, they're in better health condition, and they perform better overall when they do go out to pasture. Post-weaning, the calves do stay in for an additional 2 weeks within the calf unit. This is just so that we can reduce the stress that's placed upon them, as well as monitor their growth. Another improvement that we've made that was beneficial to the calves is that we keep them in their jackets during the colder months in the igloos and the pens for between a week to 2 weeks. This is just to reduce one of the other stresses of the movements, the new groups, the noises surroundings, and learning how to use the automatic milk feeders and water stations. It also provides them with that little bit of comfort. The calving unit itself was only designed for the Crichton cows calving in. We obviously have all 3 farms calving in here all year round, which means that the 96 calf capacity that we do currently have can get stretched at certain points of the year. This means that trying to keep the calf health performance up to a very high standard can sometimes feel like it's been compromised, even with all of the work that we're putting into it. And as well as that, it's a large number of animals of different age ranges that we have to be monitoring on a daily basis. I'd say one thing I enjoy about my job is the challenges that I face here. So this could be from having to chase the outdoor stock in poor weather conditions when they break into a field they shouldn't be in because the grass is always green on the other side. It could be from having a mad day with loads of cows calving in and just trying to keep your cool together, drinking a cold coffee, to those quiet days where you can just get the pressure washer out and enjoy the cows. So, and one of the other things I love about my job is seeing that through all the changes that we've implemented, that the calves are happier, healthier, more lively and cheekier than ever. And when they get turned out in the nice sunny days, it makes it all worth it, seeing them running about the fields.